Like the bruisers in the old movies were like just big, stocky, like, Pat Roach, this big English, like, boxer type dude. And in this one, he literally looked like Juggernaut and, Bluto's illegitimate son. Just a huge body and a tiny head. Like he had just been like mainlining steroids his entire life.
Welcome to Tairimo Boys podcast. I'm your host Cody. With me in second chair is the man who prefers to tell time using a sundial than a cellular phone. It's Jeremy.
I like to do things the hard way. What can I say?
With me in third chair is the man who's destined to see his entire childhood destroyed. It's Ryan.
Hey.
Aren't we all at this point? Good grief.
Speaking of dials and destiny, today we're going to be reviewing the new Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones 5, Dial of Destiny, also known as Indiana Poop, Turd of Diarrhea.
That's appropriate.
I believe that's the German title.
Indy 5, the movie no one asked for 20 years later. Would have loved it a long time ago. Nowadays, not so much. So, for first thoughts, I'm just going to open the floor, and Ryan, go ahead.
I'm going to be honest. I did not hate this movie. I hated some of it, but I actually liked a lot of it. To be continued.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here. Ryan's got my first thoughts pegged perfectly. I think this movie had a lot of good ideas, but they were implemented poorly. Jeremy, go ahead.
I absolutely loved about 25 minutes of this movie.
You're getting ahead of all of us, Jeremy. We haven't even talked about this, but he's getting ahead of us. What about the other 3 hours or 2 hours?
Yeah, ran on for a wee bit too long.
About 30 minutes too long.
Just about, give or take.
Yeah, the movie could have easily some of the bloat cut out of it, especially in the middle.
I don't remember. Were the first three about the same length?
They felt like it.
If anything, they might have gotten longer and longer since the movies were doing better, but I can't. That's just a guess off the top of my head because Last Crusade always tends to feel long, but I mean at least stuff's happening in the movie.
Yeah, at least you're entertained throughout the whole movie. Like I never felt the first three drug on.
Well, I always feel like Temple of Doom drags on, but
I still enjoy it.
It's my least favorite of the original three. Actually, I think that's everyone's general consensus.
That is, yeah, well, our least favorite of the original three, far better than the last two that we got.
But anyways, we're here to talk about the new one, not the old one. Those reviews are for another day. All right, so I wouldn't watch this opening weekend. Now, anytime I watch like one of these movies, I would go late at night, so like the crowds are a lot smaller. The parking lot of the theater I went to was packed, and I had the whole room to myself. That's how dead like this movie is. Like no one's excited for it. What was your theater like, Jeremy?
There were three couples total. I also went at night to one of the busiest movie theaters around. It's surrounded by an outdoor mall. Parking, very hard to find anywhere around that mall. They sure weren't in the theater. At least not my screen.
And then Ryan, I know you went like the very first showing on like Thursday.
Yeah.
What was your...
It was a little bit. It wasn't packed, but there were quite a few people there, which I would expect from a Thursday night showing. Like the last Thursday night showing that I went to that was packed was it 15 years ago with The Dark Knight.
The mighty have fallen.
Yep.
Yeah, no one's excited for this movie, and like when we're recording this on like it's been over a week out, and that anti-pedophile movie, The Sound of Freedom, is like making more money than this movie.
Does not surprise me.
I should hope an anti-pedophile movie was making money.
Oh yeah, like it's based on like a true story, I think too. The CIA and FBI, they all support this pedophile shit. Like look up The Finders, everyone at home. They're literally kidnapping kids.
That got dark really, really quick.
Yep. Da, da, da.
All right. Before we go any further, just give a warning. Like with all of our Blockbuster Boys reviews, there will be minor spoilers in this review. Once we reach a certain point where we're just gonna mass spoil, we'll give everyone a heads up and plenty of time in order to tune out if they want to go watch it themselves. All right. Let's get into it. Starting off, we're going to be talking about the first scene, which Jeremy's already kind of touched on. Ryan, I don't know about you, but I wish the first scene would have been the entire movie.
Yep. Co-signed.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Except, no, never mind. Go on.
No, you go ahead, Ryan.
No, because it's not a spoiler per se, but they messed with tradition at the very first image.
It's the mountain, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So all the other four Indiana Jones movies, they're made by Paramount. They did like the mountain thing, and this one doesn't start with a mountain thing.
No. As they say in Letterkenny, you don't fucks with traditions.
Well, this movie does a pretty good job fucking with traditions.
Pretty much.
Oh, all over the place.
So if you hear anything good about this movie, it's usually the first 25 minutes of the movie. Because it feels like an old Indiana Jones movie. Like, I don't know how the hell you go from feels like an Indiana Jones movie to like everything else, but it's so awful. Just how the contrast of it, I think that's the word I'm looking for.
It's like you were on that train.
Yeah.
And then you were there for the crash. You
were
feel
there
it.
for the boom.
You were there for the boom, and you felt it for the rest of the movie. Almost.
So, just to give everyone an insight of what's going on at the beginning of the movie. So, movie opens up. It's 1945, right when the Nazis are about to lose World War II, and Indy's like trying to infiltrate this like whole Nazi getaway thing that they're doing, but he's been captured. If you find out the Nazis have the Spear of Destiny. Ryan, was that like one of the video games?
That was going to be the sequel to Fate of Atlantis before it got canceled. But it's also a Dark Horse comic book series, which, surprise, surprise, I have. And it's very good.
Ooh, I must read this.
We will be talking about Fate of Atlantis a lot more later on in this podcast.
If I remember correctly, it was supposed to be a sequel to that.
Okay, so it never actually happened.
No.
He gets captured by Nazis. They're going to execute him. A bunch of really luck-related stuff happens and leads to a chase where he gets on the train. I'm making this sound boring, but it's so much fun. Car chasing the train, him fighting Nazis. He gets on the train, has to dodge a bunch of Nazis, and as soon as they get on the train, they find out, oh, the Spear of Destiny is a fake. Now, I do have this Dial of Destiny. This one isn't a fake. We get a whole thing where Indy's like trying to save his friend who got captured and try to get away. He ends up getting the Dial of Destiny. Okay, let me correct this. He gets half of the Dial of Destiny because the whole movie is like looking for the other half. Yeah, we have the usual Nazi fighting, gunfights. Indy ends up getting away. It feels like the whole Indiana Jones experience. Like just Indy using his wit against overwhelming odds and getting away with it. Just kind of like our Raiders of the Lost Ark review.
Yep, and that first 20, 25 minutes felt great, didn't it? I was like, man, if this is the way this movie's going to be paced, if this is what I'm going to get, boy, I'm going to be happy.
And Jeremy ended up unhappy.
Very much so.
We should probably point out that when you refer to Nazis, we're referring to the Nazis from 1945 Germany, not the Nazis of today, which are people you slightly disagree with on political and social issues.
Well said. Well said, sir.
So, there we go. First 25 minutes of the movie. Great. Everyone's having fun. Then, it's like you're sitting around and an atomic bomb hits. You're taken to the next part, the next 2 hours of the movie.
Stay tuned for our review of Oppenheimer in a few weeks.
Foreshadow.
So, Jeremy, what happens next after the fun scene?
We get to see our hero, old, sad, decrepit.
Yep, we cut immediately to like modern Indiana Jones Day, like 69. And Indy's like sad, depressed. Marion is divorcing him. His son died in Vietnam. So, hey, fuck you, viewer at home.
Fuck you, Shia LaBeouf.
Well, to be fair, I don't think anyone cares about Shia LaBeouf anymore.
No.
Did anyone really care about Indy's son? No. Do they want to see him die, though? No. Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that was brutally depressing for an Indiana Jones film.
Wasn't it?
Fuck you, viewer at home. Fuck you.
Fuck you, Kathleen Kennedy.
Indy's depressed. We're literally on the day of the moon landing, and that's like just such a minor note in this whole thing. There's stuff going on in the background, but it's just quickly glanced over. But Indy goes to class at Barnhart College. If you remember back in Raiders of the Lost Ark, like all the girls in his class were throwing themselves at him. Like now he just teaches class to a bunch of bored people who don't give two shits.
Da, 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 da.
We get introduced right then to our secondary character, everyone's favorite character, Indiana Jane.
Indiana Jane. That's a good one.
Indy's friend that was on the train that he saved back in 1940, whenever. This is his daughter. Her name's Helena, and she's really annoying.
That doesn't even begin to describe it, does it?
I really just don't want to talk about her like the whole movie, but it's like elephant in the room type thing. Ryan,
What?
why do people like Indiana Jones as a character?
Well, speaking for myself, he's brave, he's smart, he gets in over his head, he's very flawed, so it's easy for someone like me, who's also very flawed, to relate to him. I'm speaking for myself.
Well said.
You know what I'd also like to add?
Go ahead.
He's the good guy.
Yeah.
People want to be the good guy. And
Yeah.
in The Last Crusade, there's the famous line, "It belongs in a museum." We get that in the movie. Like, oh, this needs to be in a museum. Like, Spear of Destiny needs to be in a museum. The Dial of Destiny needs to be in a museum. Meanwhile, Indiana Jane, who you could tell they're trying to make a spin-off series with, she's a fucking black marketeer.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't like an archaeologist that you want to root for. This is like
One you want to arrest.
you want to arrest. She's like cocky, like annoyingly cocky, and just like know-it-all smart. Not like Indy of like he's done his research. Like, hey, I got this huge book I'm carrying with me that explains the Ark of the Covenant. Like, no, she just knows it off the top of her head. And she memorized by line 9 freaking volumes of her dad's journals.
Because of course she did.
She's basically Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory.
At least I like Sheldon.
Yeah.
That's one of the major problems of this movie is Helena. She doesn't even have a proper character arc. Like, they didn't know what the fuck they wanted to write her as.
Like, I could see like one of the directions that they were going with the character arc. I don't want to spoil it too much for the fans at home. Like I mentioned, Indy gets the Dial of Destiny, like half the Dial of Destiny, and right away, as soon as she gets it, she's like trying to sell it at like a black market auction. And then eventually the Indy points out, like, oh, you're not doing this because you want to sell it. You want to finish your father's work. But that like really doesn't go anywhere.
And that was it for the possible good arc.
For the audiences at home, if you haven't heard, this movie is like reshot to hell and back. Like supposedly, whenever they had test audiences, like last year watching this, like they came out of the theater pissed, and you could tell like the entire third act just feels like it was completely reshot, especially the very final scene.
Yeah. It's pretty glaring in that final scene.
We'll talk more about that final scene in our extra spoiler section here later on in the video.
Oh, yes, we will.
Helena meets with Indy, and supposedly the whole story is she wants to get the Dial of Destiny because Indy gave it to her father, like after the whole train thing, and he became obsessed with it. Supposedly the story she learned was that it was lost, but then she knew it wasn't lost, and find out Indy ended up taking the dial because the father wanted to destroy it, but instead of just destroying it, he gave it to Indy to destroy it. Then that didn't make a whole lot of sense. But Indy just ended up stowing it away. Before we go any further, I do want to talk a little bit about the dial. Ryan, did you like the concept of the dial without any major spoilers?
Yeah, I did. For the most part. Again, you're going to hear this a lot. You're going to hear that phrase a lot from me. For the most part, yes, I did like the concept of it. It's a little different than the other MacGuffins in a certain way, which I'm sure we'll get into later. But yeah, overall, I did like the concept of it.
What about you, Jeremy?
Actually, yeah. I mean, I'm right there with Ryan on this one.
In fact, it's after the movie, I have a copy of Scientific American with the actual mechanism as the cover story. And I did go home and read that. So yeah, I liked it.
So my opinion on it is, and like in our spoiler section, we're gonna get into like fixing this movie, but I certainly don't have a whole lot of ideas like I did with the Flash. Whenever we're looking at the first three Indiana Jones movies, Raiders, Temple, and Last Crusade, we're looking at religious artifacts. Like there's some like divine power going on that gives them their properties. Then we get to Crystal Skull, and that's just a bunch of ancient alien bullshit. Now, whenever we get to Dial of Destiny, we're told that, hey, this thing is like a time travel device, and it uses mathematics to work. So I think that's like a creative and unique way to like do the whole thing instead of magic. Speaking of magic, Indy still does not believe in magic, even though he explicitly mentions that he drank the blood of Callie and was voodoo tortured.
Poured a cup of water on his dad's bullet wound. Saw a 1,000-year-old night.
That was just a guy in cosplay.
Dropped his cup into a cliff that he had been guarding for 700 years.
Poor Indy's had it rough.
Indy, what about that night? I've been watching over that cup for 700 years, and you just threw it down a chasm?
Anyways, back to the movie after that kind of the whole side derailment. So Helena, Indy meet up. Indy shows her the doll he had stowed away. One thing I didn't mention during the train scene is there was this Nazi scientist guy on it. He was the one who had the Dial of Destiny. During the final fight on the train, he ends up getting like his head hit. He's hanging off the side of a speeding train. Ends up getting hit by a metal pole. Survives it with zero repercussions. He's the main villain in this movie. And I've watched enough train videos from India to know you don't survive that.
You definitely don't survive that.
It wasn't even like a small ding. It was ding.
Thud.
Yeah, that was a neck snapper. That's what that was.
No, that's not a neck snapper. That's a head pulper.
Head pulper. He would have been pulped. He would have been
Remember
nothing but Nazi pulp.
Anybody ever see that movie Speed with Keanu Reeves and Dennis Hopper? Where Keanu shoves Dennis Hopper's head onto the top of that moving train and it hits a stoplight, takes his head clean off. That don't happen in this movie.
I tell you what, that doctor must have the strongest jawline in the world.
Yeah.
They could have at least given him like a giant scar.
Something.
But he ended up surviving that whole ordeal, and he's the main villain in the movie. After the war, he ended up getting a job at NASA and ended up helping put man on the moon. But we're introduced to the two main villains of this movie, neo-Nazis and the CIA. Correct me if I'm wrong, there is not a whole lot to talk about after this, because the majority of the second act is just chase scene after chase scene after chase scene.
That goes on for far too long. Every time. How many chase scenes were there?
Well, do we consider the train a chase scene?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
we can. I mean, that was one.
Okay, we got the train. We got the Morocco scene. No, wait. We got the parade. No, wait. I keep remembering more. Okay, we got the train scene. Then we go to Barnhart College, and there's the chase scene on the rooftops and in the storage room. Then we have the parade chase scene. Then that goes on horseback into the subway. Then we go over to Morocco, and that leads to like them using like tiny little cabs to chase around. Then there's like a boat chase scene. Yeah, there's the boat chase scene, and then there's a like wedding car chase scene. And then we get the third act, so we're not going to spoil that just yet.
But yeah, and there's your second act. Chasing.
Minor spoiler, there's 12 chase scenes in the third act.
That there's like two. And this is where we go to like what I was saying earlier. It feels like they've got some good ideas, but they're just poorly implemented. Like Indy goes to like Helena's trying to sell the Dial Destiny half on the black market. He goes, confronts her, leads to like some chase scene in the hotel, then a chase scene down below. We're introduced to like Helena's sidekick, Discount Short Round, and Teddy. And Teddy's like such a forgettable character.
God, he was awful.
The whole black market scene could have, if it would have been focused on that instead of the chase scene where Indy just goes undercover and then it's the Dial's just trading between people as people are trying to get away. That would have been so cool, but nope. Then we get to the boat scene where Jeremy's already groaning.
Yeah, Don't even get me started.
We get to the boat scene where like half the Dial of Destiny is missing. Maybe the other half's with the boat that they found the first half on. So they go do the scuba diving. Antonio Banderas is like the main fishing boat guy. They know the the neo-Nazis are on their tail. And instead of getting like gunmen to protect themselves, nope. They go underwater. You think like something cool is going to happen underwater because Antonio Banderas is like, oh, we can only go down there for 3 minutes or you can get the fucking bins. And when they go down there, and they just get attacked by freaking eels. And it's like really dark so you can barely see what's going on. They could have done something so cool, but they didn't. Like the concept of Indy going underwater it's such a good idea, but it's poorly implemented.
But Cody, the eels, they look like snake. Get it?
That was so cringe when I heard it.
Yeah, that one hurt a little.
I don't even think eels are aggressive. I think barracudas might be aggressive, but not eels.
I did watch a video of a moray eel bite a guy's thumb off because he thought it was a hot dog.
At least it was the thumb.
I just want to mention too. Hold on. Let me just proceed before I mention this. They get like some box from the shipwreck, and the 3 minutes doesn't amount to anything. They get pulled up, and the neo-Nazis have taken over the boat. Then we get Helena being the obnoxious woman she is, ends up like out talking them and gets away. Well, one of the biggest problems I have in this movie is like they're in big cities or they're traveling between countries, and they just conveniently keep running into each other, like the good guys and the bad guys.
Very conveniently, like plot teleporting convenient.
I like the idea of the cipher thing they had, where Helena's is like reading it, and it's like, oh, you need to go to this place and look under this. And as soon as they get away, Indy realizes like, hey, this thing's made out of wood and wax. Like, no, wait, it's like made out of wood and wax, but it's like too heavy to be wood and wax. So he ends up lighting it on fire, and there's like a metal plate in there that tells them exactly what they need to do. So they travel to another location, and the Nazis like literally right on their tail, just watching them in the binoculars. Oh, they're heading this way instead of this way, so we need to follow them. So they find out second half of the Dial of Destiny is in the tomb of Archimedes, who is the person who made the Dial of Destiny. So we end up Teddy gets kidnapped while Indy's away getting supplies, and they end up doing some cave splunking, and we get into the third act of the movie. But it's just the usual conveniences. I do need to say I really loved the way they did the Tomb of Archimedes, but we're getting ready to get into the spoiler section to discuss that further. So, viewers at home, I'm going to give you a little song while we're getting ready to shift into the spoiler section. Go ahead and tune out now if you don't want to be spoiled, and make sure you return after you see the movie so we can all review it together. Alright, tune out now if you don't want to be spoiled. Da-na-na-na, na-na-na. Na 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 na. All right, welcome to our spoiler section.
Welcome back, folks.
Had more pep in it than the movie did.
No one wants to see a fucking 80-year-old Indiana Jones slugging around.
I sure didn't. So,
the Tomb of Archimedes. Like I said, I loved when they were actually started the cave spelunking because it felt like old Indiana Jones. Kind of like the whole Staff of Ra scene. Because they're in this cave, like, oh, you need to find the loudest section. So they're sitting there singing, find the loudest section. They got to climb up. Bunch of CGI bugs. Didn't like that part. Should old bridge over a walkway. Biggest criticism for it is they get to this room with like a statue of Athena in it. And Helena points out right away, like, oh, this room smells like methane. And Andy's like, oh, we gotta get out of here. This is dangerous. And like that goes absolutely nowhere.
Right.
Like I thought there was gonna be like something big, but no. They end up going further, get into the tomb of Archimedes. That's where they get the second half of the Dial of Destiny. If you're unfamiliar with Archimedes, he was this Greek. He was a mathematician, but was he an inventor?
Yes.
He was a famous guy. But one of the things he was known for is apparently the Rome was attacking Greece, and he had all these people use mirrors to reflect the light, burn up the Roman fleet. About like 10 years ago, Obama requested the Mythbusters do this because Obama loves finding new ways to kill people. And
President Obama had showed up in this movie at some point.
But the Mythbusters figured out, like, yeah, this that whole thing got myth busted. There's really no way to reflect light. That might be an urban legend, or whatever you call ancient mysteries that are fake, or maybe it was actually a magnifying glass they used. But yeah, mirror's not possible. But we get to his tomb. There, it's like using mirrors to have like light reflect on his like corpse. And what we see with Archimedes is not only does he have the second half of the Dial of Destiny, he's got a fucking wristwatch on, like on the side of his like sarcophagus. It's described as like there's like a phoenix with propellers on it, so a fucking plane. Now, since we're in the spoiler section, this movie heavily implies that time is like cemented in stone. So this is another Indiana Jones movie where if Indy wouldn't have gotten involved at all, everything would have taken care of itself.
But instead, the Flash shows up, right? Wait, wrong movie.
Instead, the neo-Nazis show up and they shoot Indy. And it's implied it's kind of like a fatal wound, but like Indy's kind of dragged along for like days with it.
That's a hell of a fatal wound. Apparently, Indiana Jones is Wolverine in this movie.
Yeah, his healing factor is off the charts.
Yep. So something we didn't mention on why they want the Dial of Destiny is, like we already mentioned, a time travel device. So it's obvious what a neo-Nazi is gonna want to do with that. But it's kind of revealed that hey, he's not gonna do what we think he's gonna do. He's gonna go back in time, kill Hitler, and take his place in order to like fix like what Hitler did wrong during World War II.
Wonder how well that would have gone over.
Yeah, it wasn't very well thought out because honestly, I think to fix World War II, all you'd have to do is tell Hitler not to attack Stalingrad and tell the Japanese to not attack Pearl Harbor.
However, what does it say that in this movie, even the Nazi was like, when I have the ability to travel through time, the first thing I'm going to do is kill Hitler.
It's not even plotted out very well. Like, yeah, he kills Hitler and then
what happens?
Yeah, what happens next? Like, oh, we're gonna start following this guy that killed Hitler, or this guy just killed Hitler. This guards are just standing around. This guy just tried to kill Hitler.
Like, what good would that do? They're trying to go back in time during the war to kill Hitler. What good is that going to do?
The guy literally put a man on the moon. Like he knows how to make rockets now, and he probably knows how to make nuclear weapons. He could easily help Hitler win the World War.
Or gone back far enough in time to replace him. It just really wasn't well thought out.
Back to the plot. They put the Dial of Destiny together. The wristwatch ends up acting as like a mechanism as part of the dial. They go to some airfield in order to hop on board a plane because they're gonna go back to 1939 and do all this. They said they calibrate the dial, get on board like I guess it was like a bomber from that time, and they're gonna have to fly through a rift in order to get back using the dial. And like this is like really confusing because like I said, this movie has a lot of good ideas that are just poorly implemented. The dial isn't opening these portals. It's I guess it's just like targeting these portals, like showing you. It's like acting like a compass to these portals. Am I wrong here?
It detects the rifts in time, wasn't it?
Yeah. So you don't even need the damn thing. You just got to be unlucky and go back in time.
All right, everybody, we're going to Tahiti. What the fuck?
There's fucking dinosaurs all around you.
We can use the Dial of Destiny as an excuse for all the disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle.
They've done some studies on that. I think it's just like bubbling up gas. It sinks the ship.
I did actually watch very good documentaries on that as well. But I like the Dial of Destiny idea better. They're just unlucky and they're going through rifts in time.
So they get aboard a plane. Helena gets on. Teddy ends up hijacking another plane to follow them. And Indy starts realizing, like, so I love the idea of this. Archimedes didn't account for continental drift whenever he was making this thing, because the whole concept hadn't been discovered yet. So they don't know where they're supposed to be going. But that doesn't go anywhere because it's heavily implied that maybe the location is fixed. And like I said earlier, it seems this movie implies that time is cemented in stone. So if someone goes back in time, they're destined to go back in time. So destiny is supposed to be a good thing. Fate is supposed to be a bad thing. So this is more they're fated to go back. So you really can't change the past. But they end up going through the portal. and they end up going to that fight with the mirrors I was telling you about.
The Siege of Syracuse.
Yep. We don't see any of the mirrors though, so maybe the filmmakers either forgot about it or they watched that Mythbusters episode.
Although we did get to see some of Archimedes' warship that he made.
They're in this plane flying over. They realize like, hey, they're not in 1939 anymore. Both the force, the Greek and Roman force, like there's a fucking dragon flying above us. So using godlike aim, they're shooting like ballistas and scorpions at the fucking plane and shooting it down. They got better anti-aircraft technology than in the modern world wars. But like I love the whole concept of like, oh, they go back in time to like some like really old period instead of what they were expecting. But like it really goes nowhere. Like the Nazis are like, the plane gets shot down, the Nazis are like all killed. I mean, you get the cool scene where like one of the neo-Nazis like busts open the window and he's like spraying like the warships with a machine gun. I wish they would have shown like more of that, but like I said, I think a lot of the third act was just completely reshot.
Yeah, it was kind of all over the place. But when they did go back in time, that was like the other part of the movie that I sort of enjoyed, like the other 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think the third act was good. It was enjoyable, but like I mean, it had major problems with it. Like, but just sitting through that schlock that was the second act, anything would be an improvement after that.
Yep, absolutely.
Anyways, Nazis get shot down. Indy and Helena land safely. They meet with Archimedes, and he's making the dial and just can't figure it out. But now that he ended up taking like the watch off one of the Nazis. So there's how you get the planes on the side of sarcophagus and his watch, and Indy just kind of wants to be left behind to die,
which I hated.
Ryan, what'd you think of it?
The part where Indy wanted to be left behind to die. Oh, it was certified Tairimo Boys fun. That
stamped approval.
I just leave me here to die.
He is a genius. He knows he would fuck up a timeline. That just bothered me so fucking much.
Yeah, Helena knocks him out, and we're returned like modern day. Like we don't see anything. It's like literally an immediate skip. They're in ancient Greece, and then back. Now they're in Indy's apartment. Now, something we didn't mention is Salah was in this movie.
Salah?
You know I can't do names.
Yes, he was.
Like, all he did was get Indy to the airport, and then he shows up at the end like, hey, yeah, we got you home and got you recovered, so now you can live out your miserable life again.
I thought maybe when he was at the airport, he'd be like, yeah, come along with me. It'll be just like the old days. And then Indy was like, nah, just stay behind. So basically, Salah was basically a cab driver.
That's literally what happens in the movie, everyone. Like, all right, time for another Indiana Jones adventure. Like, no, you're staying behind. Yeah.
Tell me you didn't almost have like a hope of redemption right there. You're like, oh, please. Let's have something happen.
Yeah, I thought like he was just gonna. I thought like later on in the movie he was just gonna show back up, like, oh, I'm here to help. Like, oh, great, but no, that doesn't happen.
Nope, just show up at your apartment.
Yeah,
the gang's all here.
Yeah, everyone's here, and then Marion gets back together with him, which, like I said before, it's reshot to hell. Like you could tell that it wasn't the original ending. And then Helena goes on to more adventures, which no one wants to see.
I know I won't be seeing them.
So, Jeremy, how do you fix this movie?
How do I fix this movie?
Yes.
I have 2 ways of fixing this movie, actually. One, I, Jeremy, use the Dial of Destiny, go back in time, and stop Kathleen Kennedy from ever dealing with Lucasfilm. That's the first way I fix it. Second way I would fix this movie, remove that entire second half. I don't care what it is, just make it a fun indie adventure. I would have at least been entertained. And that's how I fix it.
Fair enough. Ryan, what about you?
I would use the Dial of Destiny to fly through the rift to 1992. And I would make an indie adventure when Harrison Ford was 51, I guess he would have been. In his 50s or late 40s. Because I know nobody wants to hear it, and it's ageist and all the fists and stuff, but it's hard to see an old hero kick ass. You kind of want him in his prime.
And I didn't mention it earlier, but like there's constantly like Indy's trying to fight the Bruiser in this movie, and he just immediately gets beat down. It's not like a back and forth like previous movies. It's just he gets beat down like, oh, I'm too old for this. Okay, I'm captured now.
I like how the Bruiser, like the Bruisers in the old movies were like just big, stocky, like, Pat Roach, this big English, like, boxer type dude. And in this one, he literally looked like Juggernaut and, Bluto's illegitimate son. Just a huge body and a tiny head. Like he had just been like mainlining steroids his entire life. It's really unnerving.
It was unsettling.
Like Indy didn't even deal with him. Like the guy Teddy kind of just locked him up underwater and he drowned.
Yeah, which was fucking dark.
Dude, wasn't it?
This
movie.
Although, to be fair, like Indy did kill the giant thuggy under a rock crusher, and the other one died in the propeller of a German aircraft. So, maybe, but still.
And then there's the one crushed by the tank track.
Yeah.
I was gonna say this movie does a lot with dark depression and shit. Like that's the whole boat scene, how it ends with Helena throwing the stick of dynamite down and whatever, and they're taking off. And Helena's, it's like a great victory for her.
Yeah.
And Indy mentions about, hey, those were good people or whatever. I just watched my friends get murdered. Like, oh, that's dark. That's depressing.
Da, da, da.
But like I said earlier, like I don't have many ideas to fix this movie like I did with The Flash. Jeremy's like spot on. Like the second act just need to be completely redone. Like maybe stick to something with the third act. Like
that would be so much better.
Yeah, I would like to see like the whole battle and then maybe like the Dial of Destiny's purpose was to take them back. Like whoever used it to this battle to help fight this thing, and then that's when they came up with the whole mirror thing, even though it's been myth busted. Here's your really good idea too. If you want to make another Indiana Jones movie, recast Indy as a younger actor, like you do with Han Solo, and then make the first 25 minutes into a whole movie.
There we go.
Like, no more of this old Indiana Jones shit. But I think Harrison Ford's age is going to put a stop to that anyway. Brian, final thoughts?
Strap yourselves in. This is going to be a while. I like this movie somewhat. It did sort of, with the MacGuffin, kind of rekindle that. Because I remember walking out of the theater like, oh man, I want to go find stuff like this, and I want to go do this, and I want to do that. It did kind of sort of rekindle that feeling of adventure I always wanted. But it was pretty much killed by the fact that it was a pretty joyless movie. I would say this movie is the emotional equivalent of watching Negan beat Glenn with the baseball bat. Because you watch that first 25 minutes and it's really fun and it's just like the indie movies you remember. And then all of a sudden it's like, wham, my son's dead. Wham, my wife left me. Wham, nobody cares about me. Wham, nobody cares about archaeology. Wham, I'm gonna die. Wham, I want to die. And by the end of it, I'm just like kind of exhausted in a way I don't want to be in an Indiana Jones film. I had been in preparing for this movie, I had been watching the other indie movies with my girl, who I should have mentioned in the Raiders review, is also an attractive female archaeologist. And I probably should have led with that, knowing she was going to watch these. But I watched Crystal Skull, and I kind of have a newfound appreciation for it because despite its flaws, it still has a little bit of fun to it that this movie just relentlessly did not. And I'll leave it there.
Well said.
Yep.
Well said.
Jeremy, what about you? Got any final thoughts?
Yes. So the that whole train scene that everyone loves, that first 20-25 minutes, my joy for this movie died with the train crashing. And that's it.
I think I've made my final thoughts clear throughout this movie. It's got good ideas going for it, but they're not implemented correctly. I think if someone was smart, they'd be maybe even Lucas or Spielberg, they could have taken these ideas and refined them to be an actual enjoyable experience. But then again, weren't they behind Crystal Skull? If you want a good Indiana Jones experience, go play the point-and-click Indiana Jones video game, Fate of Atlantis. It does the scuba thing right. It does the travel right. It does everything right. Like, I'm seeing all over the internet people telling others to play Fate of Atlantis rather than watch this damn movie. If the Steam summer sale's still going on, you can get it for like $2.04. And it's like 3 games in one.
It brings cousins together.
Oh yeah, me and Ryan used to play that shit like nonstop like 20 years ago. Ryan, on a scale of Raiders of the Lost Ark to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where would you rate this movie?
I would rate it at Relic Hunter, which was a television show that ran for 3 episodes, starring that one lady from True Lies and Wayne's World.
Is that high or is it low?
That's pretty low.
I'm guessing low. It's a shitty movie.
Whatever that is, I rate it right there with it. Low.
Yeah, it's. If I had to rank it, it'd be like literally right around the same area as Crystal Skull. Like they're both flawed movies, but this one it's got spite in it, like spite for Indiana Jones, spite for people who like Indiana Jones, and just poorly implemented stuff. So, yep, go watch like Raiders of the Lost Ark or any of the other Indiana Jones movie, including Kingdom of Crystal Skull. Wait to see this for free on TV. If you're going to go to the theater, go watch that anti-pedophile movie, The Sound of Freedom. You guys got anything else before I wrap up?
I do.
Go ahead.
I would like to take this moment to address everybody's favorite Lucasfilm president, Kathleen Kennedy. Hi, Kathleen. I'm Ryan. Like many viewers, I have been ignoring your name in the credits of some of my favorite movies for the past 35 years. I understand that you may have some issues with the males of the human species. If it is because something terrible has happened to you, then I am truly sorry. If, however, you are upset because one time Steven Spielberg told you that you type like Michael J. Fox on an 8-day cocaine bender, you need to let it go. Like Henry Jones said in The Last Crusade, let it go. Because we're all in this together, except for Disney. The end.